So this scenario plays out hundreds of times a day. It happens all around you. It happens in workplaces. It happens. It happened to me yesterday at the airport. The scenario is, "Hi, my name is. Your name is." So let's practice that. "Hi, my name is Sam. What's your name?" Lyanne, Patty, Crystal. So what do you do for a living? Stuff. I'm a pastor. And usually at this point in the conversation, things shift. I don't know about for you, but like your occupation probably doesn't make people feel like they need to sit up straighter. Sitting next to the gentleman on the airplane last night, he asked me what I did for a living, and I told him that I was a pastor. And I always want to follow that up with something like, "I'm not that kind of pastor." Like the sweaty kind with the hanky, that's not me. But the other thing that almost immediately happens is either there's like a physical turning away that happens in the seat next to you. Like I'm going to read a book. I don't even like books, and I'm going to read a book. Or they want to show you how much they know about what you do. And inevitably the question, like, this is a good conversation. I don't know that he knew he was going to be in my sermon today, but that's all right. I'm not going to mention his name, so you can't go look him up on Facebook. He began to tell me, he's like, so what are your thoughts on what's going on in the world? And the interesting thing about that is, like, he didn't want me to tell him what I thought about what was going on in the world. He wanted to tell me what he thought about what was going on in the world. Parents aren't strict enough. They've taken God out of schools. It went from there to him telling me about his family and his kids and his life story, and about what it means to follow God. The conversation ended with him showing me pictures of Bigfoot. Now, these weren't pictures that he found on the internet. He was in Alaska, and he was on a lake, and they were cruising along on the lake, and they see what looks like a bear on the shore. And as they get closer, it's not a bear. I don't have the pictures, but I can tell you with my eyes, first of all, this guy was not a Photoshopper. Second of all, that wasn't a bear. So I don't know what it was. I don't know if it really was Bigfoot, but this is the experience that I had. And I think we all come to the table with different pieces of who we are, right? We come to the table with different pieces of our identity that we either wear on our sleeves or we keep tucked away. I tell people that I'm a pastor, and people change how they start behaving. They're like, if there's somebody who normally cusses a lot, they probably will cuss less. Or not everybody. Or knowing I'm a pastor and wanting to see if they can get under my skin, they cuss more. The truth is, you're not going to get under my skin. Not at least that way. We all bring these things to the table, different pieces of who we are. It's interesting when you ask the question, who are you? The things that come up. I'm a husband. I've been married for 21 years. I'm a father. I have 4 daughters. And it's interesting what each of those pieces of who we are bring up in the conversation. I'm a husband of 21 years. The response is often, you don't look old enough to have been married for 21 years. You're right. I have 4 daughters. I'm sorry. I'm not saying that's how I feel about it, but that's the response I get. I feel for you. That's a lot of estrogen. It is a lot of estrogen. You're right. There are different pieces of who we are that are part of our story, a part of the experience that we have in the world that maybe we don't bring up in the introductory conversation. We're shaking hands in the lobby of a hotel with somebody you just met. You don't bring up the baggage that you bring to the table. Maybe not. Maybe you do. I don't know. I don't know your life. We all have these different parts of who we are, these different parts of our story, and parts of our story that identify us right now for where we're at. And some of those things we're really proud of. And some of those things we're not as proud of. Some of those things that are things that we would keep secret if we could. Some of those things are things that if we're pretty sure that if other people knew these things about us, they would probably pull back, withdraw. There are times where I feel like that when I introduce myself as a pastor. Like, they assume that I'm judging them. I have to say that's hard for me because I try really hard to not be a judgmental person. I try very hard to accept people where they're at right now. And it's hard for me when people's negative perceptions of what a pastor is color their view of who I am. That's a challenge. We're wrapping up the series Crazy Stupid Love this morning, and we're going to be looking at a passage in the book of Luke again. We're not looking at the same passage we looked at it last week. That's not what I mean by again. Sometimes I say things, and when I say them, I hear how they might be misunderstood, and so I have to explain it, and then I find out later that nobody misunderstood me that way. This is the world I live in. This is my brain. We're going to be looking at a story in Luke 19. And Jesus is on the road. He's traveling. He's on this journey. A few weeks ago, we talked about the woman at the well. And we talked about how Jesus went out of his way to go to this town in Samaria. Like, he didn't have to go there. And I think the beautiful thing about the journeys that you find Jesus on is that they're very intentional. Like, Jesus isn't wandering. Like, Jesus is traveling with a purpose. Just outside of the city gates of Jericho, there's a man who is born blind. And as Jesus is approaching, someone says, "Oh, it's Jesus. Jesus is coming." And the man hears that. And he doesn't, he puts aside all decorum. Like he uses his his outside voice, he was outside, so I guess that's okay. But like he's, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. He like goes crazy. Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. And the interesting thing is the people that are around him and the people that are around Jesus act very similarly. Their response to this man is, hey, back up, this is Jesus. And Jesus doesn't have it. And he says, what would you have me do for you? What would you have me do for you? He says, I would have my sight. And Jesus heals the man. Not content with this idea that I'm going to exclude myself, not content with this idea that I'm going to isolate myself and put this protective bubble around me. Like Jesus pushes the protective bubble back. But they're in Jericho now. Jericho is an interesting city because you can read stories about the city of Jericho that go all the way back to the beginning of the Bible. Things have happened in Jericho. Jericho has always been a significant city throughout ancient history. And at this point in Jesus' ministry and career, it's no different. Jesus is entering a city that is significant. And it's significant in this time because it's become an outpost for the collection of Roman taxes. This is like the city where the IRS is located. And you know, when you fill out your 1040 at the end of the year, you fill it out, and if you're trying to delay them cashing your check, you fill it out paper, right? And then you get it postmarked on the 18th or the 15th or whichever day tax day is this year. You get it postmarked on that date, and you send it to Jericho. Now, actually, I want to make perfectly clear, if you send your IRS tax forms to Jericho and you are fined by the IRS, that is not my fault. I am sorry. But during this time, that's how it worked. You would send your taxes in to Jericho. You bring them to Jericho, and there, before you even went to Jericho, there was a man that would process your information and tell you what you owed. And basically, you would be required to pay whatever this man said. And the challenge is that guy wasn't always honest. I feel like sometimes I hear people talk about this time of year, and they're like, that guy still works at the IRS. And that man would say, you owe this much. You owe this much, and you have to pay it, or else. And that man, somehow, this chief tax collector would miraculously be wealthy. He would live in opulence. He would live in a large house, and he would have servants, and he would have the finest wine and the finest things. And something about that seemed off. And it wasn't a secret. Like the people in the area, the people in Jerusalem and all the surrounding area, they didn't like that guy. And they didn't like that guy because they assumed that he was getting wealthy in a way that was unacceptable, inappropriate. That he was padding his pockets with the finances that they were providing. And so, really nobody liked this guy. He was nobody's friend. He had to walk the streets and keep an eye on his back. He had to watch his six, if you will. People had it out for him. but we're in Jericho. And Jesus is in Jericho. It's interesting because wherever Jesus goes, a scene is made. He has groupies and people who are following him. And really, honestly, you can understand why. Like if you're around somebody who just healed a blind man and you have something, like I have a hangnail on my left pinky toe, I want to be near Jesus because he's gonna answer the things. He's gonna give me the things that I need. He's gonna heal the broken parts of my life. He's gonna take care of those things. And that sounds really exciting. Moreover, like the people of Jesus' day were living in a culture and in a time, in a moment where the people of their time felt oppressed, and they were looking for somebody who would set them free. They were looking for somebody who would open the door, who would answer the question of, when will we be free? And a guy that can make bread out of nothing and heal blind people seems like a pretty good king. Right? Like that's who you want to have the power. We don't need Rome. We don't need what Rome has to offer because Jesus can make all of the bread. We don't need Rome and the medical system that Rome provides because Jesus can heal all of our diseases and our infirmities and our brokenness. We don't need that. So that's a pretty good guy to have on your side. So everywhere Jesus goes, Jesus creates a scene. And it's no different in Jericho. In Jericho, the scene, the mob starts. And the chief tax collector of the city of Jericho hears that Jesus is coming. He hears that Jesus is coming. This is one of the stories that I just really love because the details that the Bible gives us are really interesting. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. There's so much detail packed into those little sentences. He was a chief tax collector. He was not like one of the sub-tax collectors. He wasn't like the lackey. He was the chief tax collector, and he was wealthy. It was a cush job, even if you were honest. But everybody assumed you weren't. Everybody assumed they knew about you. Everybody assumed that they knew your story, that you had sided with Rome, that you were taking your people's money and padding your own wealth. It goes on and it says, he wanted to see Jesus, who Jesus was. But because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. Because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So imagine Zacchaeus. He is a man who is wealthy, has things going for him, but the reality is that nobody really likes him. He's not tall. He's a short guy. And he hears this significant figure has shown up in town. He's curious. He's curious about what the hubbub is about. Because here's the thing, like a shift in power, not only a shift in power, the power dynamics of the culture is not only something that could benefit him, it could also affect him negatively. So he's curious. He wants to know what's going on. And I don't know if you know this, but there's lots of ways to get high. It's a joke that we have here, because we have high ceilings in the church, right? It wasn't all that long. Like David was here over the weekend, and he was getting high in the sanctuary the whole weekend long. He was on a ladder. It's just, it's kind of the joke whenever we have to do work in the ceilings. Walked in, I caught Mike getting high in the sanctuary. Can you believe that, Alice? Well, what I'm saying is that there's lots of ways to get a different vantage point. And there are different advantages to different methods of getting high, to reaching higher altitude. Like you can climb up and get on the roof. And the interesting thing is that during this time, like the rooftops of many of the buildings in an area were used as outdoor living spaces. They were used as places where people would congregate. So it wouldn't have been weird for Zacchaeus to climb up on the roof. It wouldn't have. It wouldn't have been weird for him to look out a second-story window. He probably had a building that had a second-story window because he was wealthy. And the curiosity that Zacchaeus showed, the curiosity that Zacchaeus brought to the table, he chose a different way. He was short. He couldn't see over the crowds. He wanted to get a different vantage point, and he chose to climb a tree. Have you ever climbed a tree? I think there's something really fun about climbing trees. Climbing a tree is not only a really good way to get a different vantage point. Like there's a scene in the Hobbit where they're walking through Mirkwood. The party is walking through Mirkwood, and they've gotten lost. They've gotten lost, and they can't figure out where they're going. And Bilbo climbs one of the trees. And he climbs all the way to the top. And he gets a different vantage point. But something else happens while he's up there. Because he's up in the tree, something is happening down below, that the rest of the group is being attacked. And Frodo is somehow saved because he's obscured from the things that are happening below. I think maybe, just maybe, there's a possibility that the reason why Zacchaeus chose to climb a tree was not just so he could get a better vantage point. It's also so that he wouldn't be seen. He wasn't very popular. People wanted to hurt him. People wanted to attack him. People wanted to kill him. People didn't like him. But there's something about this guy. There's something about this man, this Jesus. Jesus was in Jericho. Jesus was here. And I gotta know who he is. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. Go to that next slide. This is a sycamore fig tree. Pretty good place to hide. Pretty good place to get a different vantage point, but also be a little bit obscured from the crowd. I want to see what's going on, but I don't want to show that I'm interested. I want to see what's happening, but I don't want to show that I'm curious. There's something remarkable about this story. We don't have a record, and maybe it's because everybody had to pay their taxes, and that's why Jesus knew the name of the chief tax collector. He was familiar with the person. But like Jesus looks up in that tree from a distance. He sees this man in the tree. And he doesn't say, hey, what are you doing up in the tree? He doesn't say, who is that guy up in the tree? Verse 5. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and he said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. Jesus calls him by name. And like my kids have this, and I assume they got it from the internet or from friends at school or something, but like if you say something to them that they feel like points a finger at something that they have going on in their life, they're like, Dad, why are you calling me out? Why are you calling me out? That's kind of what Zacchaeus, like Jesus looks up and he says, hey, Zacchaeus, come down. Jesus is calling him out. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. Verse 7. All the people saw this. Like this entire interaction, you have to imagine, the crowd is moving with Jesus. Jesus comes to the spot where Zacchaeus is, and now the crowd is around all of them. And I imagine that their thought, the crowd's thought is, Jesus is going to get him. He's going to tell him what for. He's going to tell him exactly what he needs to hear, that he needs to repent, he needs to quit it, he needs to stop, he needs to just change his life. He needs to turn around. That's I think maybe what they're hoping for. There's whispers. All the people saw this and began to mutter. Isn't that how it works? Jesus shows up. He starts doing what he does. And people don't like it because Jesus doesn't do what he is expected to do. He doesn't topple the empire. He doesn't overthrow the kingdom. He doesn't pull down the powers and the principalities. What does he say to Zacchaeus? What does he say? Go to that next slide. Actually, go back. Sorry. 2 more. That one right there. Jesus reaches the spot and he says, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. I must stay at your house today. This is not an Airbnb situation. Like, there were specific places that you, as a person in the first century Palestine, would not stay, would not hang out. There were people that you would not be associated with. There were people that you would not admit to knowing, in public or otherwise, because everyone was watching. Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. This is not a small thing. Like, I feel like in America today, like, meals aren't what they were. Like, you go, we have restaurants all up and down Main Street and all over the city, and we can go in there and order food, and we don't really have to be, we as the person who is there patronizing the restaurant, we don't even have to be nice to the people. We show up, we sit down, and if they take too long bringing us our drinks or the menus or whatever, like, we can just lose our mind and act like a child. Like, hospitality isn't a thing. Hospitality isn't a part of our culture, but back then, when you ate with somebody, it meant something. You would sit down at the table, and the guest, the guest list was a significant thing. Who would be at the table would be a significant thing. And so as a part of sitting at the table, as a part of sitting, and here's the thing, like Jesus doesn't say, he doesn't pull Zacchaeus aside and say, hey, we should go grab coffee. Like, preferably the least popular coffee shop. We should go and like have a conversation about how you're going to make planning your exit strategy out of this life of sin. He doesn't say that. In front of everyone, he says, hey, you, Zacchaeus. He calls him by name. He doesn't call him, hey, chief tax collector. He doesn't say, hey, thief. He doesn't say any of those things. He calls him by name, and he says, I'm going to your house today. We're going to enjoy table fellowship together. This was a significant act of intimacy. This choice to eat with this person was not a small thing. This choice to sit down at the table with Zacchaeus was not a small thing. I think it's interesting because as you go on, the people began to mutter, but Zacchaeus stood up and said, Lord, look. It's me. I'm the problem. It's me. Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Like I think we want that commitment up front a lot of times. we want this encounter to go in such a way that we know that Zacchaeus is going to respond this way ahead of time, before we commit to put ourselves out there, before we commit to putting our reputation on the line, because that's really what Jesus was doing. Jesus put his own reputation on the line. He says, Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house today. Jesus put his own reputation on the line. Verse 9. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. We all bring a lot of things to the table, a lot of pieces of who we are, a lot of parts that we identify with, and things that define us. And I think sometimes, preemptively, we decide that those things disqualify us from Jesus pursuing us, Jesus seeking us out. Like, I'm going to go ahead and assume that I don't belong because it's easier. It's safer. So we go hide up in our tree. It's not that we're not curious. We want to know what's going on. We go hide up in our tree and we're like, I want to figure it out. And we live in an age where this is easier than ever. Like, you can be curious about what's going on in your local church without ever even attending, without ever having to show up. But here's the thing. Here's the thing in this story. Jesus saw Zacchaeus up in that tree. Jesus sees you right where you're at. With all of the list of things that you've told yourself disqualify you from being at the table. All of the different pieces that you've decided mean that you don't belong. The beautiful thing is that Jesus saw Zacchaeus. He sees you right where you're at with your list. And the beautiful thing is that Jesus doesn't care about what the crowd thinks. Jesus doesn't care what the mob thinks about him. He doesn't care. He says, Zacchaeus, I'm going to have dinner with you because I love you. Because I want you at the table. I want you. And it's not, he doesn't say, I want tax collectors at the table, though that's what he's accused of. Jesus was constantly accused of being friends of tax collectors and sinners. Jesus doesn't say, I want tax collectors at the table. I want sinners at the table. Jesus says, Zacchaeus, I want to be at your table. Specifically, you. Right where you're at. You specifically. No matter what backstory you have, no matter what your occupation, no matter what the list of things that you've used to identify or disqualify you. And because sometimes that's easier, that's safer, right? I don't want to be rejected again. I'm going to assume the answer is no. I'm going to assume the answer is no because I don't want to be disappointed. God sees you. Jesus sees you. He sees you up in that tree. He's calling you down. He wants you. Specifically you. Not the person that's sitting next to you or the person who's not sitting next to you or somebody who has got it all together, somebody who has figured it all out, who has all of the answers. Specifically you. The mess that you're in. The broken place that you're in. The hurt that you're in. Specifically you. He's calling Zacchaeus. I know it's weird that he's calling you Zacchaeus, but stay with me. Zacchaeus, I want to eat with you. I don't care what the crowd thinks. Come sit at the table. There's room at the table. Tony sang that song earlier, and I would like to invite him back up to sing for us one more time. And it's easy for us to sit back and think, well, you know, the song lists all of these different things that keep people away, that keep people out. And when that's not your thing, it's easy to sit back and sit with the crowd. But specifically you, whatever your backstory, whatever your history, whatever is going on in your life, specifically you, Jesus is calling out of the tree, out of hiding, to eat with you, to fellowship with you, to hear your story, to know your name, to love you, to accept you. And here's the beautiful thing. Everything changes for Zacchaeus. This moment changes everything. This moment doesn't happen to change everything. This moment happens because Jesus sees Zacchaeus right where he is. He wants him. Not to fund his ministry, could have. Zacchaeus could have funded Jesus' ministry. Jesus doesn't care about that. Doesn't care what the crowd thinks. I want to eat with you. I want to sit with you. You. Specifically you. This morning I'd like to pray. And as we pray, I want to ask you this. Are you somebody who has created that list? Why you don't fit? Why you don't belong? Why it's not you? I just want you to hear your name. Hear your name. Today, hear your name. God, I thank you that you saw me up in that tree, hiding my shame, hiding the parts of my life that I was afraid to admit were there. You called me by name. Lord, and everything changed because of that. Thank you. As we sing this song, as we sit and listen to it, I just want you to hear